why did I choose it? Well, I knew it was just a temporary thing before going to full-time ministry, so it didn't really matter. It was just exciting, interesting, and afforded me the opportunity to save some money. I didn't think that hard about it. But now, I get to spend my time telling people about Jesus, teaching the Bible, seeing people grow in their love of God, and that's just amazing. In a way, it's like a green growth.
So I became a Christian at uni while I was studying medicine. And so when I was thinking more seriously about working, I think it was a bit too late to stop studying medicine. So I finished my degree, and I guess from there there's a lot of options. Like you can do work as a doctor where you do shift work, or you can do ones that you're on call. And I think I guess I decided to do GP because there's no shift work first of all, so I can come to church and I can also go to growth group. And it's also very flexible in that I can work part-time. That's kind of what I'm doing now. And it frees me up in terms of my headspace as well as, just time to lead growth group and go to church. And I guess we're Christians first and then everything else after. And so I guess I'm doing what I'm doing because it allows me to prioritize Christian ministry and doing what actually lasts, as Mike was talking about.
I got into the area I'm working in because I really liked maths and computers, so I decided to be a software engineer. But then when I thought more seriously about what I wanted to prioritizing work-life balance, because I just wanted a job that was just a job and wasn't going to take over my life, so that I would have time to do ministry and go to church and try to attend everything.
I thought about what is the job that will allow me to speak about Jesus to as many people as possible, and being a teacher allows me to do that. Go into a classroom, I'm in a full group of students, I can tell them about Jesus, or teaching other stuff. I do teach Christian studies at the moment, but before that I was teaching chemistry and physics and science.
Just about to say, stop using your phone. Good. I'll be real with you guys. As a uni student myself, a lot of the times it comes down to who's actually going to give you a job. So that's something to think about. Some of you guys might be in a better position, but a lot of the times it's I'll take what I can get. But that being said, transitioning from uni to full-time work, I'm sure there's a lot of things to consider, but you'll kind of be at the mercy of your employer. But as you kind of progress, some things you want to seriously think about, like a lot of the other panelists have said, is will this job allow me the time, attention, and energy to fulfill my duties as a Christian? Hey man, you can be making all the dollars in the world, but if you can't go to church, if you're neglecting your family, that's up to you to decide what's more worth. Those are definitely considerations you want to have in mind when you think of your work and career long term.
Thanks, Shannon. Okay, so next question is, how do you seek to share the gospel in your workplace?
I find it really hard to share the gospel. I think anyone who gets involved in arts or that side of work will tell you it's pretty hostile to the gospel. So I think just being a Christian in that space is pretty cool. And my husband always used to say to me, have you told them you're a Christian yet? Because I think sometimes we can think it's weird when someone says to you, what did you do on the weekend? You're like, I went to church. It feels like a weird thing to put in there. Maybe just to say what's important to you. Say, I'm a Christian, or I'm Jesus is important to me. But I think setting yourself up early to have a conversation when you say that with some of your colleagues is good, because it automatically means you're a light or a witness to Jesus then and everything else that follows. They don't just think, she's a nice person. They think, man, she fears God. There's something bigger about this person and what they think. So can you just remind me again what the question was?
How do you think to share the gospel in your work?
As I said, it was hostile. I think I was really encouraged some days ago, really to share the gospel in my workplace meant getting there early and praying for my colleagues in the car, reading my Bible, so I was thinking about God throughout my workday, and working for, he says in Corinthians, not just working for my boss, but working for God and what I did to bring him glory. I did ask my colleagues to church, and recently I've been working in a school and in Bible study, we've been praying for someone who's not a Christian. I prayed for my colleague, and she's like, oh, I'm actually interested in God, and we're going to link her into church, and I've lent her a book about God to chat about. So, yeah, there's some opportunities that have come up from that, which have been really good too.
I think, look, in a work environment, two things that you have to think of is, as a Christian, are you brave enough to talk to your colleague about Christianity? Right? When I understood God's love, that means a lot to me. I never shy to talk about God because He loves me. Work is kind of thing that a vehicle to give you opportunity, much opportunity. And I remember on my work where lunchtime, I open the Bible at my lunchtime. I sit, I open the Bible, and people come and say, what are you reading? And I said, look, I'm reading Mark. And, oh, okay, it's good, right? The next week, or the next day, I open again. And what are you reading? I said, Mark, right? But the opportunity of having that in a workplace is really big, guys, I tell you. And people understand that, even though they're not an unbeliever. And one of the Hindu friends comes to me and asks me about it. Who is Jesus? I spoke to him, had a chat. And funny thing to say that even my boss, my boss, one day he was a bit, sad and things like that, and something happened. And I said to him, boss, is that okay if I can pray for you? I did it because I know that God's love is important. And don't be ashamed of doing it, guys. It's the important thing in life that you can do. Work is work. You can have the money that you have. You can big cars, big house. But one thing that they don't have is the living God, and that's important.
Those are two really good answers. I feel like this is a good question now. Well, I mean, for me, it's a bit different. In full-time ministry, it's my job to talk about Jesus, so we'll leave that to one side. But at my old job, I can just echo what people said. I think you've got to let people know you're a Christian early on. You've got to be able to say, hey, yeah, I went to church, we did this. People have got to know, because then people notice how you behave at work. People really notice. And for me, at my old job, it was a very somewhat aggressive workplace. We were on the trading floor yelling at people sometimes, and people noticed that you're different. And when I left my job, I had multiple people come along to church to hear me preach after I went to full-time ministry, because they could see I was so different. And I had conversations at work. If you just open about who you are, about just being a Christian, people, and you're praying for opportunities, people will ask you questions about Jesus. I had a friend ask me, he called himself a Christian, and he said, so what's with Jesus? Is he God? Or is he the Son of God? That kind of conversation comes up because we're praying, people open about being a Christian and also living a Christian life.
At my current job, pretty much all the other duties are Christian, which is great. So maybe I'll talk about when I was in hospital. I think it's more just we didn't really have an opportunity to have good chats because I was so busy, but just fostering those relationships and then catching up with people outside of work, and then doing life with people and praying for opportunities to come about when we're just meeting up with them. And lots of opportunities have come, and I have had really good chats with some colleagues, which has been great, and I'm continuing to meet up with them and praying for them, so probably in that way.
Yeah, I think for me as well, just echoing what everyone else has said, because I work with a team that's almost fully remote, it's actually really hard to have conversations about Jesus because I barely see my colleagues face to face, and we don't get to have that much like small talk. So I think that's why it's even more important for me that I watch my life and my conduct and make sure I'm living in a Christian way. So, for example, and these are all things like you don't have to start when you get to work. Like you can do all these things right now. Not swearing, not involving myself in gossip or talking badly about my co-workers. If there's a work event, not getting drunk. And I think also just being faithful in your work, like not being lazy. And I guess there's also a flip side to that, not being too obsessed and consumed about work. Yeah, that's one thing I try to do. And also, one really cool thing about my workplace is we have a Bible club. And one of the awesome things we've been able to do is at Easter, we were able to get a weekly newsletter about what the true meaning of Easter is. And yeah, that was just really awesome because I think at Canva, we're very pro LGBTQI. We're very liberal and left-wingist, but I think we're a bit scared about how that message will be received, but there's a really awesome opportunity to share about what the true meaning of Easter is.
So when I worked as a science teacher at National Boys High School, I had many opportunities to talk about Jesus and read the Bible with students after school, and also let the other teachers know about Christians often pride giving thing on Christians. I currently work at Arnhem School, and so that came to talk about Jesus in the classroom and in the chapel space. So become a teacher if you're really keen on doing that.
I'm a strong believer in actions speak louder than words. So like Gina said, I think conduct is important. You need to ask yourself the question, whether my co-worker or colleague or fellow student at uni or school, it relates to you now as well. You need to ask the question, am I being a good ambassador for Christ? You know, if I'm a slack student, don't listen to anything the teacher or professor says, never turn anything on time, nasty to my friends, and you turn around and tell your friend, hey, by the way, I go to church, I'm Christian. What do you think they're going to think of A, you, and B, Christianity? Those are the questions you need to think about. Because, if you do a poor job representing, chances of you, being a good kind of, representative to share the gospel with and opportunities like that are very minimized. So keep that in mind. Which kind of, going off of what Mike shared earlier as well, whether that's in the workplace, as a student at uni or school, wherever, that's why being, doing everything with the Christ-centered mentality is so important. And also, I think it's important to be very courageous. Like Gina said, there's a lot of workplaces, a lot of unis, you're gonna have a lot of friends that have very different worldviews and may even laugh at, what the Bible teaches. But you gotta be able to stand your ground 2 feet down, don't give away. And, sometimes that'll mean you'll be alone, sometimes that'll mean you're ridiculed, but you gotta stick to your guns.
Thanks, Sean. I can recall when I was at uni, there was a guy who I knew was a Christian and he was dating another Christian girl, but he never told anyone that he was a Christian. This is my sports science degree. And then when I noticed a few times we went out with everyone, he would get drunk, and I noticed he never shared the gospel in my recollection. And then I was sad to hear that after uni he actually fell away. And so maybe you're not stepping up and letting yourself be known as a Christian and keeping yourself accountable. It can give you space to kind of start drifting. And so, that was a good warning and encouragement there. My next question is, what decisions have you made to keep church ministry a priority?
I think I've learned more from my mistakes than my decisions, to be honest. God's been very merciful. One mistake that I made, which comes to mind, has been when I was working in an interiors job and we'd be open on the weekends and you'd get paid double time to do a Sunday shift. And I was like, oh, that's good, I'll do that and then go to church. But then my friend, who was a young Christian, also thought she'd do that with her waitressing job and stopped coming to church. And I just remember reflecting on that and going, man, how we act and choices we make can so affect our colleagues and like our friends as well. And just kind of coming to church sleepy versus well rested and able to keep God's word. That was a mistake I made versus a decision. And another thing I want to say, because I did share that I work as an interior designer, but then also a stay-at-home mum, was I wish that someone had said to me when I was a young woman, what's a job which is going to make that I'd be freed up to be at home with my kids? Because I found that even though I love working as an interior designer, I just had to quit it when I had my kids. It's not a job because it's project managing where I could do it easily and look after my kids full time. So yeah, I could go into it again when Anastasia's a bit older, but I think finding a job, like Mike was saying about being a missionary, why not take up a language now while you're in school? So you'd be freed up to not have to struggle so much when you go to another country to learn a language, even if it's a different language, that would be an amazing skill to sharpen your linguistics. So, you know, if you want to spend some time one day being at home with your kids, what's a job? Maybe being a GP would mean you could go back to work a bit more easily as a teacher. So, yeah, ask other people who are mums maybe, what's a job that's compatible with motherhood and work, and that can help you find well and make decisions to glorify God with the life you live.
So, ministry. A few months ago, I think about another ministry that I can go, and I prayed for that. I talked to some of my friends, and God willing that He gave me this opportunity. So I want to be a chaplain. And so I said, how can I do that? You know, I'm working 5 days a week. You know? So I did spoke to my boss, and I asked him, say, look, can I have a half day in a given day on Tuesday? And so I said, oh, okay, that's good. And so I did a course of chaplain for a few weeks, something like that. Now in God's will, that I made a chaplain. I'm a fourth chaplain in New South Wales. I do it every Tuesday, half day. I'm still working. But that didn't happen because of I wanted, because I prayed for it. I pray that God will give me this opportunity to serve Him in a ministry as a chaplain. And so that is kind of thing that you have to ask yourself, how can I do minister God's word between work in the future? And you have to pray for it. And if God's willing, it will happen. Trust God, because it will happen.
I don't have too much to say except being willing to quit to do full-time ministry. Maybe some of you will be in that boat, and it certainly was for me. I left a really great job. It was a dream job. It's the kind of job that most people would sell their left kidney to get. I was getting paid $500,000 a year, and I left that to do full-time ministry. I don't regret it. It's awesome doing full-time ministry.
I guess I talked about the decision to go into GP, but yeah, I think more like I heard that Mike was saying that some of you want to be just will, I guess all of the kind of prestigious or high-paid or those jobs, they all require sacrifice, like a lot of your time, a lot of your headspace, honestly, I don't know if I would recommend people to go into medicine, because medicine is a place where it's like give up everything to do medicine, and that's what I see a lot of my non-Christian doctor friends doing at the moment, and all. And only now did I really recently make the decision to do GP, because it did allow me to prioritize ministry a little bit more. But it was so tempting. It was very tempting to not come to church because I was so tired. It was tempting to not do those shifts that meant that I missed growth group and missed church, because sometimes it's just easier. There's always temptations pulling you in the way of the world, and luckily I have great friends and church around me that helped me to make the right decisions, and God has kept me. But yeah, it's hard. is what I would say.
Yeah, I think for me, just get in the habit early of making church non-negotiable. When I plan my week, like Wednesday night growth group, Sunday church, and my extra ministry meetings I do, those are just non-negotiable. I plan my week around that. And I think it's, yeah, like Helen said, it's really tempting to not want to show up to growth group or church because you're like, I'm so tired from work or whatever you might have on. But also to learn, it's okay to come to growth group like that. It's better you come and you share with your brothers and sisters, like, I've been finding work really hard lately, or I've been finding my studies really hard lately, than to not show up. And I think also, I just want to echo and affirm Pip's point about something I wish I had been told when I was younger is if you are a female, consider, like, if you want to become a mother, like, what sort of job can you do to help you be a Christian mother? Yeah, I think that was something I never thought about, and I wish I thought about earlier.
Keep coming to church, make it a priority, and look for ways of serving at church, whatever that might be. I think that's the best, one of the best places to keep a focus on how to do ministry outside, at work, but to keep them thinking in mind about how to serve at church, keep you well grounded.
Yes, discipline and priority, especially being a student like yourselves. You know, a hypothetical I could ask you is, I know some of you have HSCs around the corner as well, so this is a very good hypothetical. If you know you have a big exam coming up on a Monday, you know, and you need time to study, don't default to thinking, I'm going to skip church on Sunday to study. If you have your priorities straight, you would give up other things throughout the weekend and the week before to make sure you can squeeze in both church and study time. That's a hard decision to make. You have a lot of other fun things you can do, right? And I guarantee you, if you don't start getting into the habit of doing those things now, when it's small things like tests, exams, when it comes to asking yourself, am I going to give up $500,000 a year to go into full-time ministry? It's not suddenly going to become magic because it's a big decision. If you're not in the habit of making those decisions and with small things, I guarantee you it's not going to come easy when it comes to the big things. So I really encourage you to start now, start early.
And as we reflect on like serving in church, every person here is here like because they're great at thinking about serving. I think particularly about Rob like often on like I've just seen him so many times like come in on like a Saturday and just like set up pretty much all of church or set up the tech and no one's around, no one knows the stuff that Rob does, but he helps set up the tech and stuff here. Like if you ask him, like he could be out like with his family and he goes, yeah, I'll be there in a minute. So he's one of the most godly serving guys I know. So to hear him even talk about chaplaincy, it's like this guy, spend more time with Josh and Caitlin and Rob, and you'll learn a lot of wisdom from just watching them. Rob. But like Colin and Christian, could you just hand out the cupcakes just while we a second? The last question, I'll make it a double combined kind of question, and then we'll have a little bit of Q&A. So the questions together are: how have you seen the temptation towards status and materialism? If you've already talked a little bit about that, you can spend more time talking about what wisdom would you give to the youth at this point in their lives, how to keep Jesus at the center as they think about their school, and then their study and their work. So keeping Jesus at the center, but you can also reflect on temptations towards like materialism and stuff.
As an interior designer, I love that the Bible talks about God as a creator, and then sometimes heavy parts of the Bible in Kings or Leviticus or even Heaven where you hear all this intricate detail into the craftsmanship and design God puts into things. So I think that we can mirror our creator when we kind of work hard and work diligently. I think the temptations in the interior design world are for sure the projects you've worked on and landing that job, or how much money your job kind of squeezed out. The other day I was helping a friend look for a rug, and might have been $500 for a really large rug, and then I found a site which I used to use all the time. They had run some $50,000 a rug, and it's like, oh my gosh, who has $50,000 to put towards a rug? I think the temptation is that in that industry there is a lot of wealth, or people putting a lot of money to these things and just saying that's to help people make their homes or to make a place reflect them or reflect a certain vibe, but also say that's not ultimately the point, right? The point is to reflect our King and Creator or bring Him glory, and how do you do that? I think is a hard challenge and a temptation in my role. But what was your last second?
The gospel and have a look at it. I think that's a safe place where you can deal with temptation. Now, my advice to you, and this is what I do every morning, and I never miss it. When I wake up in the morning and I go and take a toothbrush, I look at the mirror, right? I look at the mirror and then I said, God, what's the plan today? And that set your day. That set your day. By just saying this word, God, what's planned for today? That makes it much more probably easier. Because as the day goes, that question, God understands that, and God will reflect that to you. So ask yourself in the morning, just in the mirror, because as I said, God made us in His own image. Look at the mirror and say, God. I'm not saying you're God, but I'm just saying is that look at yourself. What will you do to glorify God today?
Materialism, big temptation today. I've been there. I've sat in a conversation at work where one guy was like, guys, what car should I get next? Should I get a Porsche or a Tesla? And that was just a serious conversation. And so what I want to say is don't get caught up in the thinking that, if only I had a bit more money, I'd be happier, things would be better. I've been paid a lot, and I don't think I'm going to be any more happy to see that bonus come in. That's just a lie that the world is telling you. So don't think that more money will solve your problems or make you happier. You need enough to live, but past that, more won't make you happier. And I think key to that is just knowing the gospel and dwelling on it. We're here for just a short time, right? We've got to live in light of eternity. What are you going to do with your time here on earth when it's so short? Are you going to make the most of it?
What was the second question?
Well, I just like how you feature Jesus at the centre going forward.
So I think in terms of where you guys are at, something that would be helpful is so I think the best thing that came out of me going to UNSW and doing medicine was actually going to campus Bible study, CBS. So probably at school and also at uni, we have really great Christian groups. So just getting heavily involved in that. And also, coming to spots you have all of you guys around you, and the leaders are great. I think just kind of continuing to keep those ministries at the centre so that you have an external motivation to continue going, because that's we do life in community, and you have all of these people that God has given you around you so that you can continue to do life in that way. I think that has really helped me to keep grounded in who I am as a Christian, and learn all the things that they have said before.
I think in terms of temptation, I work for a pretty fun company, which is very extra. So we get free breakfast and lunch prepared every day from our in-house chefs. It's very crazy. We have a wood-fired pizza oven in our rooftop. But I think, as cool as those things are, it's really important to realize my company is only doing those things because they want work to be your whole life. They're giving you these things in exchange for your soul. So I think, you need to recognize that that's why they're giving you those free things. And I've actually been reading 1 Peter with a sister at church, and it has a really important message about us living as exiles in this world and seeing heaven as our home. And I just really want to encourage you guys to keep living that way. Like people keep saying it, but money doesn't buy you happiness, and that's so true, and I've seen that in my colleagues and myself. There's nothing more important in this world than to be following Jesus and telling other people about Jesus. So don't fall for the temptation of trying to grow your material possessions here, but keep looking towards heaven as your home.
My temptation at work is to control other people and gain as much power as I can in the school environment. So promotions are a big thing. That's a temptation to keep going up. But as far as keeping safe, how to keep priority of the gospel, having a good mentor has really helped me when I was younger, as a young Christian, and you guys. And I think it's important, it would be really great for you also to seek out older mentors who can sit down with you, you can be open with, you can read the Bible and ask any question about what it means to grow up as a Christian, and a mentor who can model a godly Christian life for you.
I guess when it comes to materialism, I have like 2 kind of practical things that I've been taught as a child. I don't know how well I've kind of done it, but number 1 is being financially disciplined. Now, not so you can save all this money and buy the next biggest, baddest thing, no. Just so you get into the habit early of making sure in your mind, you control the money doesn't control you, alright? That's number 1. And number 2, I would really encourage you guys, especially, maybe some of the more senior students, as you guys start taking on casual work, part-time jobs, so on and so forth, get into the habit of giving generously for like the works of the gospel, show God that you are willing to part with your worldly wealth. And again, like I said in my previous thing, if you can't part with $10, trust me, you can't part with 10 million. So like get into the habit, start small, do that. And I think when it comes to keeping Christ at the center of your life, whether that's in a student context or a work context, I guess Christian fundamentals is huge. And I know this isn't some really exciting or flash answer, but read your Bible on a regular basis, meditate on God's Word, spend time praying. You can think of all these big ministries you want to join, but if you don't got the fundamentals down, you're not going to get very far anytime soon. So keep that in mind. Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks, Jen, also for the shout out to the Spark Offentry box, which is just out there. I appreciate that. And isn't it crazy, here that people here have been paid $250,000 a year, and they're having conversations about buying a Porsche or a Tesla, or they get their breakfast and lunch made for them, and they're still keeping Jesus number 1. That's super encouraging to me, and it's a good model to you. Now it's open to you. Does anyone here have any questions as they've listened and they want to know a bit more about something or something else that we talked about, Jonathan?
Alright, so Pride Month just ended, right? So I just want to know how people who work at a company who a company does a lot of things for Pride Month, how do you deal with that as a Christian?
Such a good question, Jonathan. Who wants to go?
My company is huge on Pride Month. It's really hard. I even work with a colleague who is a they them, and I constantly struggle to say the right pronouns. I think for me personally, just don't compromise. Be courageous. It's okay to tell your colleagues that you are a Christian. And also, if no one's actually ever said anything malicious to me about being a Christian, but in my mind, if someone were to, I would question them if they're being inclusive to me about my beliefs. I also try my best to not partake in any of the pride activities. So we have like drag trivia after work, or we actually have these t-shirts that are all in rainbow colors and say, I love LGBTQ plus humans. And I actually own one that I wear as a pajama, but I never wear it in front of my colleagues. So none of my colleagues have seen me wear those shirts. So yeah, just keep being a Christian and don't compromise.
Yeah, such a good question, Jono, and such a great answer. So thanks for modelling, because that's the world all these guys are growing up in. Yeah, people do.
I was going to say, I also found that, Jono, that I had a lot of people in that community who I mingled with. And I think there's just opportunities that we're both human. We both have things we love. We both love the same coffee. We both love the industry we work in. So there's heaps of stuff that brought us together rather than divided us. And I remember reading in a book recently, like, show up at their things so they'll show up at your things. Like, when my kids got baptized or when we got married, people from my industry came and showed up because I showed up and, you know, spent the time to go to their house or help them move or have a coffee. So, yeah, do life together in a way. Obviously, don't do life in a way that will celebrate the things which you disagree on, but do life with them as friends, and that will give you the opportunity to also share your faith or to share the Christian message about all of us being sinners who need Christ. Yeah.
Any other questions? Oh, just thanks, Jeff.
How do you honor God when you're like partying with like your co-workers or your friends?
Great question. Shano, did you want to?
I mean, I'm not much of a partier, but
Did you want to?
yeah, sure.
Man, this is tricky because especially if you're going into uni and stuff, you know, like a party seems like a big part of that experience. I'll be real with you. I think there are certain like situations, places, scenarios where it's just simply incompatible with your identity as a Christian. Now, that doesn't mean because we're Christians we have to be prudes. We can still enjoy ourselves from time to time with our worldly friends. But that being said, you need to draw like a very, very, very distinct line where you're not going to cross. And if you know that going to a certain party or event is going to tempt you or push you to cross that line, the wise decision would be to not go in the first place, right? And yeah, like these are very, you know, tricky things. It sounds easy when I'm talking about it, but when you guys go out there to experience it for yourself, it's a lot of trial and error, unfortunately, but like, you know, the others have said, let's stick to your guns, have confidence in the truth and what is right, and, you know, the world might not know that you're giving up a fun night with your friends for the sake of Christ, but trust me, God knows, and, you know, He knows what you're giving up, and to Him, He recognizes that.
If any has points to answer. Yeah, I mean, I used to like go out and do a lot of like clubbing and stuff, and I remember when I got to a point where I stopped drinking when I went out, so that people didn't, because I get very excitable just generally talking to people and hanging out. People would think I'm drunk without alcohol, so I just didn't have alcohol with me and would be the designated driver, and yeah, and so people that would raise questions, how come you're never drinking, always having a Coke or something like that, and I get to say, oh, because I can enjoy life without needing to get drunk, and I do that because I want to honor Jesus and live a self-controlled life, and then open conversation to it. Oh, yep. Alex has
Sorry, this is to Aaron. Sorry, I never met you, but your story was really encouraging. I was just wondering, what was the process of leaving that work environment, and what did your non-Christian friends say when you decided to go into full-time ministry?
Well, as Mike mentioned earlier, going to full-time ministry is often a very long journey. So while I was at uni doing my doctorate, I really enjoyed serving in church. I was part of the lay preaching group, loved leading Bible study, loved teaching people about Jesus and answering their questions. And my old minister, he had this blog, and he said there were 4 things you want to look for if you want to do full-time ministry. and you might have heard these in a different format, but he said things like opportunity. Maybe some of you've got maybe a sick family you need to care for, and you just can't do it. Your giftedness, if you just can't, explain the Bible clearly. Not that you're going to be perfect straight away, but if there's no sign of giftedness in that regard, then it's going to be very hard for you to do full-time ministry. Or maybe you're just the kind of person who says the wrong thing at the wrong time, kind of thing. Maybe you shouldn't do full-time ministry. Another thing would be godliness. If you've got issues in your godliness, then obviously not suited for full-time ministry. And finally, your desire to do it. Because full-time ministry is hard, and if you're not really keen on doing it, you're going to burn out, and that's not helpful for anyone. So I felt like, I think I tick all these boxes. So I asked my pastor, what do you think? He said, Aaron, you'd make a great pastor, you should do it one day. So from then on I knew, okay, I'll do full-time ministry one day. At that time I didn't really like doing research, but I finished my PhD and I knew, okay, I'll just get a job, work for a bit, and then go into full-time ministry. But it ended up taking 5 years because full-time work sometimes does suck you in. And maybe it took God pushing me because things were getting difficult at work, various things happened, and I thought, okay, maybe this is God's way of saying, look, you should do what you said you were going to do and go into full-time ministry. So I left. I had some Christian friends at work, and they told me, one of the guys, his boss was not a Christian guy. He read my email about why I was quitting, and he said, this is the craziest thing I've ever read. I can't believe he's doing this. So it was really cool because, it did make people think, whoa, this guy's giving this up to do this. It's crazy. And it was crazy enough that, and I guess people saw I lived differently at work. They thought there was something to it. So I had a few friends from work come to hear me preach afterwards when I quit at church. They were interested enough to find out a bit more. Non-Christian friends also thought it was a bit crazy. And I guess the person who thought it was the craziest of all was my mum. My mum was very, very sad that I left that job. She still hates the fact that I'm doing full-time ministry. But that's a cost that is worth it still. Doing full-time ministry is still worth it. Sorry, was there anything more you wanted to know?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. We might put the formal question time to an end there, but before these guys go, there's still more time. Hopefully, if they don't have to rush off, you can ask them more questions. So just apologise to some of the parents that if some of the kids are not staying for lunch and you need to pick them up. Sorry, I've gone a little bit long, but